"You must be lost, sweetheart. The reception desk is on the ground floor." Manager Richard Sterling didn't look up from his monitor. He said it the way a man says something he has said 100 times, casually, like a joke that had stopped being a joke to anyone but him. Keisha Cole set the deposition binder on the corner of his desk without a word. He glanced at it, then at her. Then he picked up the binder with 2 fingers, walked past her to the office door and dropped it in the hallway. The sound of 900 pages hitting polished concrete carried all the way down the corridor. 2 paralegals stopped mid-sentence at the copier. A junior associate looked up from his laptop and pretended he hadn't. "Pick it up on your way out, associate," Richard said. "And next time, learn to knock." Richard Sterling had no idea that the woman standing in his doorway was 3 weeks away from calling him into a conference room, saying his name into a microphone, and directing building security to escort him out of the firm he thought he owned. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, and if you love a good corporate reckoning, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. 6 days earlier, Keisha Cole stood in the elevator of the Harrington and Doyle Tower on 52nd Street and watched the floor numbers climb. 47 stories of corporate litigation, mergers and acquisitions, and the kind of quiet old money that never advertised itself. Her firm now, though only 3 people in the entire building knew it yet. She had memorized the layout. She had memorized the names. She had memorized the roster of the corporate litigation division on the 34th floor, the division she was about to walk into wearing a temporary badge that read K. Cole, Junior Associate Litigation Support. Technically inaccurate, strategically perfect. The elevator chimed. She stepped out into a reception area with white orchids on a black lacquer desk and a receptionist who barely glanced up. Down the hall, she could already hear him before she saw him. Richard Sterling, division manager, 15 years at the firm, and the reason she was standing here in an off-the-rack suit instead of the tailored charcoal hanging in her closet at home. She had a folder tucked under her arm. Inside the folder was a printed copy of an executive summary that senior partner Alina Vaughn had personally couriered to her 3 weeks earlier. The summary ran 47 pages. It contained the names of 9 people who had resigned from Harrington and Doyle's litigation division in the past 4 years. 6 of them were women. 4 of them were women of color. Every single one of them had, at some point in their exit interview, made a reference to what one of them called a hostile pattern of conduct from division leadership that HR declined to formally document. Alina Vaughn had circled that line in red pen. Below it, in her tight handwriting, she had written a single sentence: "This ends now, or it ends the firm." Keisha had accepted the offer that same afternoon. She started walking down the corridor toward the corner office. She had 30 days to see the whole picture before she moved. She intended to use every one of them. That was the plan on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, it would already be halfway compromised, because Richard Sterling did not know how to wait 30 days for a woman like her to reveal herself. He announced himself in the first 4 minutes. The corner office on the 34th floor had a floor-to-ceiling view of the East River. Keisha noticed it in the same second she noticed Richard Sterling, and she filed both observations away without commenting on either. He was sitting behind a broad glass desk with 2 monitors angled toward him, a phone cradled between his shoulder and his ear, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold at least an hour ago. Late 40s, silver at the temples, the kind of blue suit that photographed well and wore expensively. He held up one finger when she stepped into the doorway. He did not gesture for her to sit. She stood. He kept talking on the phone for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. She counted. He was talking to someone named Marcus about weekend plans, about a boat, about a woman named Allison who had cooked something over the weekend that had, in Richard's telling, been, quote, too ambitious for her skill set. He laughed twice. He did not once look at Keisha. When he finally hung up, he set the phone down, leaned back in his chair, and looked at her the way a man looks at furniture that has been placed in a room without his approval. "You must be the new one," he said. "Keisha Cole. I was told to check in with you this morning." "Right." He looked at his screen, tapped something, looked back at her. HR sent me your resume last week. Columbia Law. He said the name of the school the way you might say the name of a restaurant you had heard was fine. 3rd year at Marston and weeks in D.C. some pro bono work, a federal clerkship. He paused. Interesting profile. Thank you. I didn't say it was a compliment. Keisha did not move. She did not blink. Richard leaned forward and steepled his fingers on the glass desk. Let me explain something to you, associate. I don't care what your resume looks like. I don't care what your recommendations say. I don't care that Alina Vaughn personally signed off on your hire, which, by the way, is unusual and I've made a note of it. What I care about is whether you can hold your own on my floor. And I'll tell you right now, I've seen this pattern before. Fancy school, fast track, big smile at the interview. 6 months later, we're filling out a departure package because it turns out corporate litigation is harder than the mock trial team at Columbia. He gave her a small, thin smile. So here's what we're going to do. For the next 30 days, you're not going to touch a case file. You're going to shadow. You're going to run documents. You're going to sit in the back of the room and observe. And if at the end of those 30 days I decide you have the temperament and the discipline to work on my floor, we'll talk about assignments. If not, he shrugged, we'll have a very polite conversation about your future somewhere else. Keisha waited to see if he was finished. He was. Understood, Mr. Sterling, she said. Good. First assignment. There's a deposition binder in the workroom for the Chen matter. It needs to be organized by exhibit number, cross-referenced to the deponents, and delivered to conference room B by 10:45. It's about 900 pages. Chop, chop. He turned back to his monitor. An associate, close the door behind you. She closed the door. In the workroom, she found the binder. She sat down at the long table, opened her laptop, and began working through the exhibits with the calm, mechanical precision of a woman who had organized deposition binders in her sleep as a first-year associate a decade ago. It took her 32 minutes. She had budgeted 45. She was 10 minutes early to the conference room. Richard Sterling was not. Conference room B was on the north side of the 34th floor, glass on 3 sides, the kind of room designed to be seen from every direction. At 10:45 sharp, Keisha placed the organized binder at the head of the table. She took a seat 2 chairs down from the head, opened her notepad, and waited. At 11:03, 6 people filed in. 2 senior associates, 3 paralegals, and a mid-level litigator named Bradford Kane, whose name Keisha had memorized from the division roster. She recognized every face. None of them recognized her, which was exactly the point. At 11:07, Richard Sterling walked in carrying a fresh coffee and an expression of studied inconvenience. He did not sit at the head of the table. He stood beside it, set his coffee down, and picked up the binder Keisha had assembled. All right, he said, flipping through the tabs. Chen matter status. What have we got? Bradford Kane started to run through the discovery timeline. Richard interrupted him twice, corrected him once on a date he had gotten right the first time, and then, mid-sentence, held up the binder in the air. Who put this together? The room went quiet. I did, Keisha said. Richard looked at her as if he had forgotten she was in the room. He turned the binder around and displayed a page to the group. Exhibits 47 through 52. Cross-reference to deponent Chen, second deposition. You cross-referenced them to the first deposition. Keisha looked at the tab. She had cross-referenced them to both. The primary reference was to the second deposition, which was the correct one under the case's operating protocol. She had also included a secondary reference to the first, in italics, in a footnote at the bottom of each cross-reference page, because 2 of the exhibits had originally been introduced in the first deposition and later re-authenticated in the second. It was the way any competent litigator would have organized it. The primary reference is to the second, Mr. Sterling, she said. The italicized note at the bottom is the, I don't want an italicized note at the bottom. I want the primary reference to be correct. He slapped the binder shut. Did I ask for editorial commentary, associate? Did I ask you to reinvent the cross-referencing system that this firm has used for 15 years? No, sir. No, sir. He mimicked the tone, higher, slower, mocking. Two of the paralegals looked at the table. Bradford Kane looked at his laptop. Nobody looked at Keisha. Redo it, all of it. I want it on my desk by end of day, and I want it done the way I asked for it, not the way you decided was cleverer. He dropped the binder on the table in front of her with a heavy, deliberate thud. A pen rolled off the edge and hit the carpet. Keisha picked up the pen. She placed it back on the table. She said, "Understood, Mr. Sterling." He was already moving on. The meeting ran another 40 minutes. Richard interrupted her twice more, both times to correct things she had not said. At 11:52, when the meeting adjourned, the room emptied in a careful, professional way, the way rooms empty when everyone in them has just watched something they do not want to acknowledge witnessing. Bradford Kane paused at the door. He looked back at Keisha for half a second. Then he walked out. She sat alone at the conference table with a 900-page binder that did not need to be redone and a notebook in which she had written in small, precise handwriting the time, the date, the participants, and the exact language Richard Sterling had used. She underlined the phrase "the way I asked for it." She closed the notebook. She picked up the binder. She went back to the workroom to redo it. The pattern established itself with the efficiency of a man who had been running it for years. By Wednesday of that first week, Keisha had been asked to fetch coffee for a client meeting she was not permitted to sit in on, told to reorganize a filing cabinet that did not require reorganization, and publicly corrected in a division stand-up for using the word plaintiff when Richard had decided, in that particular moment, that the preferred internal terminology was claimant. On Thursday, he stopped her in the hallway outside the copier and asked, loudly enough for 3 passing associates to hear, whether she had ever actually taken a deposition before or whether her federal clerkship had left her, in his words, quote, "a little theoretical." On Friday, he threw a printed brief at her, not directly at her. He tossed it in her general direction across his office. It landed at her feet with the pages splayed open. He said, "This is unacceptable work, associate. Redo it." Then he turned back to his monitor. Keisha bent down and picked up the brief. She looked at it. She had not drafted it. She had never seen it before. It bore the signature block of a junior associate named Warren Halpert, whose desk was 3 cubicles down from the workstation she had been assigned. "Mr. Sterling, this is Mr. Halpert's brief. I know whose brief it is." He did not look up. "I'm giving it to you to redo. Halpert has actual client work this weekend. You have time, redo it." She looked at the brief. She looked at him. She said, "Understood, Mr. Sterling." She took the brief back to her workstation. Warren Halpert was at his desk. When she walked past, he glanced up, saw the brief in her hand, and quickly looked back at his monitor with the reddened expression of a man who had just realized that his work had been used as a weapon against someone else and had no intention of saying anything about it. She sat down. She read the brief. It was fine. It was not brilliant, but it was competent, filed on schedule, and did not require significant revision. She opened a new document. She rewrote it anyway, cleaner, tighter, with the argument structure sharpened and 2 case citations updated to more recent circuit authority. She did not put her name on it. She left the signature block as Warren Halpert's. When she was finished, she attached the revised draft to a professionally worded email and sent it to Richard Sterling at 6:14 p.m. on Friday evening. He did not respond. She had not expected him to. That night she sat at her kitchen table in the small furnished apartment the firm had rented for her in Murray Hill. She opened her laptop. She opened the encrypted case file she had been maintaining since Monday morning, 72 hours of documented incidents, each one time-stamped, each one written in the neutral, careful language of a legal filing. She added Friday's entries. At 10:47 p.m. her phone buzzed. A text from Alina Vaughn. "Check-in Sunday, 4 p.m. your apartment. I'll bring coffee." Keisha typed back, "See you Sunday." She set the phone down. She looked at the case file on her screen. 11 separate documented incidents in 1 week, 5 of them in front of witnesses, 2 of them involving physical objects, the pen, the brief. She had not yet crossed the threshold that would trigger a legal claim on its own, but the pattern was accelerating. That was the piece that mattered, not the individual incidents, the velocity. The way each one built confidence in the man doing them that there would be no next-day consequence, and how that confidence, unchecked, pushed him to escalate. She closed the laptop. She thought about Warren Halpert's red face at his desk. She thought about the paralegal who had not looked at her in the meeting. She thought about who else was in the building watching. She had 23 days left. Alina Vaughn arrived at Keisha's apartment on Sunday afternoon at exactly 4:00 p.m., carrying 2 paper cups from the coffee shop on the corner and a leather portfolio under her arm. She was 61 years old, silver hair cut short, and had been at Harrington and Doyle for 34 years. She was one of only 2 women on the firm's executive committee, and she was the sole reason Keisha Cole had been offered the managing partner role in the first place. She sat down at the small kitchen table. She set the coffees down. She opened the portfolio. "Tell me what you have." Keisha turned her laptop around. Alina read for 6 full minutes without speaking. She read the way a senior litigator reads a discovery production, methodically, top to bottom, no skimming, no reactions. When she finished, she closed the laptop and looked at Keisha across the table. "He threw a brief at you. He tossed it in my direction. It landed at my feet. That's the same thing legally, and you know it." Keisha did not disagree. Alina took a slow sip of her coffee. "The pattern you have is enough. If you filed today, outside counsel would move to open a formal investigation within 48 hours, and Richard Sterling would be on administrative leave by Wednesday. You know that too." "I do, but you're not going to file today." "No." Alina nodded once slowly. She had known Keisha for 6 years, going back to a cross-border merger they had worked on together when Keisha was still at Marston and Weeks. She had known the answer before she had asked the question. "Tell me why." Keisha turned her laptop back around. She scrolled to a separate document she had been building alongside the incident log. It was a spreadsheet. Names down the left column, behaviors across the top. Small notations in each cell, dates, contexts, a numeric code she had assigned to categorize the severity and the type of complicity. "There are 42 people on the litigation floor," she said. "In 1 week, I've documented meaningful complicit behavior from 29 of them. Not participation in the harassment. Complicity. Averted eyes. Silence when they had the standing to speak. The paralegals who removed themselves from the room when they saw it coming. The 2 senior associates who have, on separate occasions, made small jokes designed to give Richard cover in the moment. Bradford Kane, who has watched every single instance and said nothing to anyone." She looked up. "If I file today, I remove Richard Sterling from that floor, and I leave 29 people who have spent years learning that this is how the floor operates. Half of them will interpret his removal as an overreach by the new executive. The other half will interpret it as a temporary correction, and they will go back to enabling the next Richard Sterling the moment one arrives. In 6 months, the culture on that floor will look exactly the same, just with a different name on the corner office." Alina was watching her carefully. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to let him escalate." Alina set her coffee down. "Keisha, I'm going to let him escalate to a point where the entire floor sees it happen and cannot look away. Not a private meeting, not a hallway comment. Something public enough that the 29 people who have spent years averting their eyes will have to make a choice in real time in front of each other about who they are." She closed the laptop. "And then I'm going to let them watch what happens next." Alina was quiet for a long moment. "You are asking me to authorize you to keep going into that building knowing what he is going to do. I am asking you to trust the plan we agreed on when I signed the contract." Alina looked at her. Then she nodded. 23 more days," she said. "Don't let him hurt you. He won't." Monday morning began at 7:52 a.m. with a division-wide email from Richard Sterling, sent to every attorney and paralegal on the 34th floor, subject line, "Weekly Performance Review, 1 attached document." The attached document was a single-page Word file. It contained 1 paragraph. The paragraph named Keisha Cole. It described her first-week performance as, quote, "disappointing, marked by editorial overreach, poor attention to established protocol, and a general failure to grasp the fundamentals of corporate litigation at the level this firm expects." It closed with a sentence noting that her second week would, quote, Determine whether her placement here is sustainable. He copied Elena Vaughn on the email. He did not know that Elena Vaughn had, at 8:04 a.m., forwarded the email to the firm's outside counsel of record with a single line above it, for the file. Keisha read the email at her workstation. She did not react. She did not respond. She opened her incident log, added the timestamp, attached a screenshot, and closed the log. Then she stood up, picked up her notepad, and walked to the workroom for the 9:00 a.m. document review session she had been assigned. The document review session was Richard's next move, and she had seen it coming since Friday afternoon. He had assigned her to lead the review of a 14,000 document production in a securities matter, with a Wednesday deadline that was, on its face, impossible for one attorney to meet. The setup was clean. She would fail the deadline, he would document the failure, and the paper trail would begin to support the narrative he had opened with Monday morning's email. She had budgeted for it. At 6:00 a.m. Sunday morning, she had emailed a contact at a New York litigation support vendor she had used at Marston & Weeks. The contact had confirmed by 7:00 a.m. that the vendor could assign a team of 8 contract reviewers to the production by Monday morning, pending client authorization. Elena Vaughn had authorized the engagement at 8:00 a.m. Sunday under a discretionary budget line that did not require Richard Sterling's approval. The team had been working since 6:30 Monday morning. By the time Keisha walked into the 9:00 a.m. session, the review was already 40% complete. She sat down at the head of the conference table. 6 associates and paralegals filed in behind her. She opened her laptop. "Good morning. We're reviewing production in the Meridian Securities matter. Deadline is Wednesday at close of business. I've engaged outside contract reviewers to accelerate the first pass. Your role this week will be second pass privilege review and issue coding. Assignments are in the shared folder. Any questions?" The room was silent for a moment. Bradford Kane looked at her. "You engaged outside reviewers?" "Yes." "Under whose authorization?" "Executive Committee discretionary budget. The engagement letter is signed and in the file." Bradford Kane blinked. He looked at his laptop. He looked back at her. He said, "Understood." At 9:47 a.m., Richard Sterling appeared in the doorway of the conference room. His face was tight. He had, Keisha suspected, just seen the vendor engagement in the system. "Ms. Cole, a word." She stood up. She looked at Bradford Kane. "Please continue the assignment walkthrough. I'll be back in 10 minutes. She walked out of the room and down the hall behind Richard Sterling. He did not speak until they were in his office and the door was closed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Executing the review, Mr. Sterling. You do not have the authority to engage an outside vendor without division approval. The engagement was authorized by the Executive Committee. The paperwork is on file." "By whom?" She looked at him. "Ms. Vaughn." His face did something small and cold. He was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he escalated. "Sit down, Ms. Cole." Keisha did not sit. She remained standing just inside the door of his office, her notepad against her side, her posture level and unhurried. Richard registered the refusal without commenting on it. He walked around his desk and sat down in his leather chair. He folded his hands on the glass. "I don't know what impression Elena Vaughn gave you when she recruited you. I don't know what promises were made. But let me clarify something for you very carefully because I don't want us to have this conversation twice." He paused. His voice was lower now, more controlled, the voice of a man who had, in the 15 minutes since he had seen the vendor engagement in the system, decided to stop performing for an audience. "Elena Vaughn does not run this floor. I run this floor. Every case that comes through this division, every associate who works on those cases, every vendor engagement that touches those cases comes through me. Not because of a bylaw, because of 15 years of institutional practice that no memo from the Executive Committee is going to change in one weekend." Keisha kept her eyes on his. "You went around me on Sunday. You engaged a vendor at a cost of, I'm assuming, somewhere north of $40,000 without so much as a courtesy email to the division head. You then walked into a 9 a.m. meeting on my floor and issued assignments to my people as if you had the standing to do it. I want you to think very carefully about the next thing you say to me, because whatever you say is going to determine whether the rest of your week is difficult or impossible." He waited. Keisha said nothing. Richard leaned back. His jaw worked once. Then he leaned forward again, and this time his voice had a different edge to it, the quiet, calibrated edge of a man deciding, in real time, to cross a line he had told himself he would not cross. "Let me tell you what I think is going on. I think you got a fancy offer letter and a big title dangled in front of you somewhere down the line, and you decided that gave you permission to walk into a division you don't understand and start playing at being a partner before you've earned the right to sit at the table. I've seen it before. I've seen it specifically from women who come out of federal clerkships thinking the clerkship was the hard part. It wasn't. This is the hard part, and you are failing it. Publicly. In front of my entire floor." He stood up. He walked around the desk. He stopped about 4 feet from her. "So here is what is going to happen. You are going to walk back into that conference room. You are going to tell those 6 people that the vendor engagement was a miscommunication and that assignments are being revised. You are going to email Elena Vaughn and thank her for her assistance and inform her that on further reflection you have decided to handle the review internally. And then you are going to come back to this office, and we are going to have a much longer conversation about what it looks like when you actually respect the chain of command on this floor." He waited. Keisha looked at him for a long, level moment. Then she said, "No." The word landed in the room like a small object being set down on the glass desk. Richard's face did not move. "Excuse me. No, Mr. Sterling, I'm not going to do any of those things. The vendor engagement is authorized and in place. The assignments are appropriate. Ms. Vaughn is aware of the engagement and the executive committee has approved the budget. The review will proceed as I described in the conference room." She paused. "Is there anything else?" He stared at her. Then he stepped closer. He stopped about 18 inches in front of her, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath and the faint, sharp edge of his cologne. He did not raise his voice. He did not raise his hand. He simply stood there, using the geography of the room as a weapon, the way men like him had used it for as long as offices had existed. "You are going to regret this conversation, Ms. Cole. Please step back, Mr. Sterling." He did not step back. "You are going to walk out of this building at the end of this week. And when Elena Vaughn is retired next year, which she will be, there is not going to be anyone left in this firm who remembers your name. That's how this works. That's how it has always worked. You think you're the first one to try what you're trying. You are not. Mr. Sterling, please step back." She said it again, calm, level, the same volume as the first time. He held the position for another half-second. Then something in his face shifted, some small internal calculation, and he stepped back. Not far, just enough to comply on paper. He returned to the edge of his desk and leaned against it, arms crossed. "Get out of my office." "Yes, Mr. Sterling." She turned and opened the door. She did not close it behind her. She left it open, which she knew he would notice, and which she knew would irritate him for the rest of the afternoon in a way he would not be able to articulate to himself. Small choices, cumulative pressure. She walked back to the conference room. She sat down at the head of the table. Bradford Kane was still standing at the whiteboard where he had been walking the group through the coding assignments. He looked at her. She nodded once. He kept going. At 12:14 p.m., Keisha excused herself from the review session. She walked to the small women's restroom at the end of the 34th floor corridor. She locked the stall. She sat down on the closed toilet lid. She pulled out her phone. She opened the encrypted case file. She typed for 11 minutes without stopping, the exact language, the exact positioning, the exact distance he had closed, and the exact number of seconds he had held it. She noted that the door had been closed at the time. She noted the absence of witnesses. She noted the shift in his voice and the specific phrase, "You are going to regret this conversation." She saved the file. She sat for another minute. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket, and walked back to the conference room. That evening at 7:38 p.m., Elena Vaughn called her. "He filed a grievance. Against me. Against you, insubordination, bypassing the chain of command, interfering with divisional authority. He filed it with the executive committee at 6 o'clock. He also CC'd Reginald Doyle personally. Reginald Doyle, the second name on the door. He and Richard play golf. That's not a coincidence. That's the play. Keisha was quiet for a moment. She was standing at the window of her apartment watching the traffic on 2nd Avenue. How much did he write? 4 pages. He is careful. There's nothing in there that would be defamatory on its face. It reads as a legitimate managerial concern about an associate who has, quote, exceeded her scope in a way that risks the firm's client relationships. And Doyle's response. Doyle called me 20 minutes ago. He is requesting an emergency executive committee session tomorrow at 10 a.m. to review the grievance. Keisha closed her eyes for 1 second, then she opened them. Good, she said. Convene it, and tell Doyle I'll be attending. Keisha, tell him I'll be attending as counsel of record for the subject of a separate compliance review that has been open since last Monday. Alina was quiet. Then she laughed once quietly. Understood. The executive committee boardroom was on the 44th floor. 8 partners around a long walnut table, morning light coming in through the east-facing windows, a pitcher of water and a stack of leather-bound folders at each seat. Reginald Doyle sat at the head. He was 72 years old, silver-haired, and had spent 41 years building the firm into what it was. He was also, according to the log of golf club reservations that Alina Vaughn's assistant had quietly pulled the night before, a man who had played 19 weekend rounds with Richard Sterling over the last 2 years. Richard was already seated when Keisha walked in. He was in a blue suit, freshly pressed, a legal pad open in front of him. He did not look at her when she entered. She did not look at him either. She walked to an empty seat halfway down the table, placed her portfolio on the wood, and sat. Doyle opened. Thank you all for coming on short notice. We are here to review a grievance filed yesterday evening by Mr. Sterling regarding conduct by Ms. Cole during her first week in the litigation division. Mr. Sterling, please walk us through your concerns. Richard walked them through. He was good. Keisha registered it professionally without emotion. He was very good. He spent 18 minutes describing her performance in language that never crossed a line, never used a word that could be flagged in a transcript, never named her identity as a factor in anything he had observed. He described her editorial overreach on the deposition binder. He described the unauthorized vendor engagement. He described the assignment meeting in which she had, quote, positioned herself as the divisional lead in a way that undermined the established authority structure. He closed by saying, with a small, regretful shake of the head, that he had reluctantly concluded that Ms. Cole did not have the temperament for corporate litigation at Harrington and Doyle, and that a departure package should be prepared. He set his legal pad down. Doyle looked at Keisha. Ms. Cole, your response. Keisha did not open her portfolio. She said, before I respond to the grievance, I would like to request that this session be paused for approximately 90 seconds to allow 2 additional attendees to join. They are already on the 44th floor. My assistant will bring them in. Doyle frowned. Ms. Cole, this is a closed executive committee session. Additional attendees require Margaret Whitfield, Director of Compliance, and Ann Petrov of Petrov and Ash, our outside employment counsel. Ms. Petrov has been retained by the executive committee, and I believe you signed the engagement letter 3 weeks ago, Mr. Doyle. Doyle's expression changed. Alina Vaughn leaned back slightly in her chair, allowing the room to absorb the moment without interrupting it. Doyle said, bring them in. 90 seconds later, Margaret Whitfield and Ann Petrov walked into the boardroom. They took the 2 remaining seats at the far end of the table. Ann Petrov opened a leather binder in front of her that was approximately 3 inches thick. Keisha opened her portfolio. Mr. Doyle, colleagues. 3 weeks ago, at the request of senior partner Alina Vaughn, and with the confidential authorization of 5 of the 8 members of this committee, I accepted an assignment at this firm under an assumed job title. The assignment was to conduct an on-the-ground behavioral audit of the corporate litigation division, focusing specifically on the conduct of division manager Richard Sterling. The audit was commissioned in response to a pattern of resignations from the division over the past 4 years, 9 departures, 6 women, 4 women of color, each of whom referenced conduct concerns in their exit documentation that were never formally investigated. The room was very quiet. Richard Sterling was looking at her. His face had not yet caught up with what his brain was beginning to understand. She continued, "I documented 47 incidents in 8 business days. 11 of them are corroborated by direct witnesses whose statements Ms. Petrov's team has taken over the last 72 hours. 6 of them are captured on the building's own security camera audio in common area corridors." She looked at Doyle. "I'll continue if the committee is ready," Doyle said. "Continue, Ms. Cole." She continued. She read from the portfolio in the same measured tone she had used to organize a deposition binder 8 days earlier. Monday, 9:14 a.m., closed-door meeting, opening comments regarding her Columbia Law credentials. Monday, 11:07 a.m., Chen Matter meeting, 6 witnesses, publicly mischaracterized her cross-referencing work. Wednesday, 2:32 p.m., copier corridor, comment regarding federal clerkship, 3 witnesses. Friday, 4:18 p.m., Sterling's office, physical throwing of a document at her person in a manner consistent with intimidation. Monday of the following week, 6:07 a.m., division-wide performance memo describing her first week work as, quote, disappointing. Monday, 10:11 a.m., Sterling's office, closed-door confrontation, physical closure of interpersonal distance to approximately 18 inches, verbal statement, quote, "You are going to regret this conversation." She read for 11 minutes without stopping. Richard Sterling did not move. When she finished, she closed the portfolio. Ann Petrov spoke for the first time. "The committee has already been briefed on the standing engagement. The audit findings, together with the documentation Ms. Cole has just summarized and the corroborating witness statements taken over the last 3 days, meet the threshold for termination for cause under Section 12 of the firm's partnership agreement. We have prepared the paperwork. It requires the committee's vote and Mr. Doyle's signature." Doyle looked at Alina Vaughn. Alina said, "I move to terminate Mr. Sterling for cause effective immediately." A partner at the far end of the table, a woman named Priya Iyer, said, "Second." Doyle looked around the table. The vote was 7-1. Doyle himself abstained. He did not vote against. He simply did not vote. It was the last professional decision of his career at the firm, though he did not yet know it. His own conduct in relation to the Sterling matter would be reviewed independently over the following 6 weeks and would result quietly in his early retirement. Doyle signed the paperwork. Ann Petrov slid a second document across the table to Keisha. Keisha stood. She walked to the head of the boardroom. She did not sit in Doyle's chair. She stood beside it. "Mr. Sterling, effective as of this moment, your employment with Harrington and Doyle is terminated for cause. Building security is waiting outside this room. You will be escorted to your office to collect personal belongings under supervision. Your access credentials have already been revoked. Your firm-issued devices will be surrendered at the security desk on the ground floor. Outside counsel will be in contact regarding the ongoing conduct review, which will proceed independent of this termination." She paused. "You may stand up now, Mr. Sterling." He stood up. He did not speak. He did not look at anyone. He walked to the door of the boardroom. 2 uniformed security officers were waiting in the hallway. He walked between them. The 3 of them moved down the corridor toward the elevator. The 34th floor was already at work when he arrived. 42 people at their desks. Bradford Kane at his workstation. Warren Halpert 3 cubicles down. The paralegals at the copier. Every one of them looked up. Every one of them saw him walk past with a cardboard box and 2 officers and no title. Nobody said anything. The elevator doors closed. 2 hours later, at the all-hands meeting on the 40th floor, Alina Vaughn stood at the microphone and introduced Keisha Cole as the firm's incoming managing partner, effective immediately. She spoke for 4 minutes. Keisha spoke for 2. "The work," she said, "begins quietly, the way good work usually does." The 42 people on the 34th floor went back to their desks. The orchid on the windowsill of the managing partner's office had one small pale green bud at the base of its stem. Keisha watered it that afternoon. She had work to do.